Are you interested in stories of action and adventure? If so, I recommend checking out my episode-based book series, The Demon Slayer Sidekick, on Kindle Vella. The first 3 episodes are free to read, and new ones drop every single week. That's all I have to say, and now, onto the video. Hello everybody! JGCM here, and today we're going to be reviewing Demon Slayer, the Swordsmith Village Arc, or Kimetsu no Yaiba Katanaki no Satohen. We're doing the Swordsmith Village Arc and all that. I don't know if I said all that right, but we're just gonna roll with it. So yeah, this is season 3 of Demon Slayer. So let's just hop right into it. So what is the story of the 3rd season of Demon Slayer? Well, the basic concept of it is Tanjiro needs to get his sword fixed. However, the guy that makes his swords is not sending him a new sword. So he's trying to go to the Swordsmith village in order to get his sword all done and fixed up. So that's where the story takes place at the start. He heads to the village and things just kind of escalate from there. So yeah, that wasn't a great description, but we're just gonna roll with it. So in terms of spoiler-free thoughts, this was fine. Like all the other Demon Slayer seasons, it had a pretty good finale. I really liked the finale of this season, but overall, it's just kind of more of the same. It's just more of what we expect, you know, big action set pieces, dramatic moments that are cool, yeah, but overall doesn't really leave much of an impact, at least on me personally, since I've mentioned before that I don't care much for action set pieces. When it comes to action, I like it, don't get me wrong, I think it looks cool, but I do want more than action in my story. And one flaw of Demon Slayer is that the story isn't exactly super unique when it comes to that element. Most people love it for the action, and for me personally, the fact that most of it was just action and there wasn't as much story going on really didn't sit with me personally, and it's just the way it's always been with Demon Slayer seasons. Even when I was watching season 2 and I talked about how much I really loved the finale of that one, I kind of feel the same way here too, where the finale, the end of the season, was actually really good, but everything else up to it was just kind of since when it comes to this show, it never really tries to build up its world too much. It'll set up like a map for us to follow, and then we go to a location on said map, and then after we go to location, there just happens to be some form of powerful demon there that Tanjiro and crew has to destroy. And that's just kind of like the whole concept of a lot of Demon Slayer. Just go to X location, and then after that, fight some dangerous demon in said location. That's it. And that is basically what's kind of dragging the show down for me a little bit, since there's so many cool ideas here. Like when I was watching the first episode, I thought, okay, this might actually be something new to see. But then things kind of just fell down from there, as it just turned into one big action fest. And while there were some cool moments here and there, it just didn't really do it that much for me. It's not a bad season, don't get me wrong. There are some really good moments in there, and as I said before, finale, really liked it. But overall, the season was just kind of more of the same. Just the cool action set pieces where you create these interesting environments but don't really do much with them, just kind of basically explain them, and then the rest of the season is just pow pow, slice slice, all this random stuff where people will shout out forms even though there's not really much of a difference to them. But yeah, so there are some things that I do think have some good moments here, but I can't really go into much about them without spoiling, so I won't go into too much about those. But some things I can talk about positively with this season is that, once again, the animation at times is really on point, although there are some flaws. Without going into the spoilers about this right now, I'll talk about it a bit later. There's some CGI in this season that I saw some people say it's not that bad. It's not bad. And while I don't think they're wrong that it's not bad, with how much they use it, it gets really distracting. Like, if there's just a little bit of CGI here and there, I don't mind it. It's not a big deal. But there's some times where they use a crap ton of CGI in this, and it is super off-putting, at least for me personally, and it's hard to ignore. And sometimes I get what this is all about how they're trying to push out new Demon Slayer seasons practically every year, so it makes sense that they're struggling to keep up with the constant demand for more Demon Slayer. And sometimes it just makes me kind of wish that they were given more time with this, because while I admit I probably wouldn't have changed my opinion on the season this much, the CGI in this can be really, really off-putting at times, which is why it doesn't always work out for me personally, and it does get pretty distracting, especially when it's all up in your face. But yeah, that's all I can really say without spoiling anything, so we're just going up to the spoiler section now. Here's a timestamp to one of the spoilers, and if you have seen the show, I recommend sticking around to hear my thoughts, since it's always fun to hear other people's opinions and maybe the comments down below. But Yeah, but if you haven't seen the show, you should skip to the end so you don't get any spoilers. But if you have seen it, stick around so you can hear my thoughts. So yeah, I'm gonna count up from 5 and enter the spoiler section. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I want to go back to some of the things I actually really liked about this. We can move on from the CGI stuff for now and talk about that later. But one of the things I do have to say I am kind of happy about is some of the departures for this season. In this season, a lot of characters departed for a bit and weren't coming back for some time. And by some time, I'm sure maybe it's next season or something. But basically, I was so happy when I learned Zenitsu would not be in this season. I am one of those people who doesn't like Zenitsu. I like his cool sleeping form, but when it comes to his actual self, he really grinds my gears. So him not being in the season was a massive, positive for me. It was a very positive moment, and the save could also be in a negative as well, because with the addition of Zenitsu, there's also Inosuke. Inosuke also wasn't in this season, and that's sad, because Inosuke is my favorite character, so that was a bit sad. Although, unlike Zenitsu, he did get a cool little goofy moment, not cool, but goofy moment at the start of the season that I really liked. And it just reminded me, yeah, this is why Inosuke is the best character in Demon Slayer. He's such a funny and such an entertaining character. If there was a whole spin-off show just on Inosuke, I'd probably watch it because he's just such a great character, especially with the comedic moments. And yeah, so glad Zenitsu wasn't in it, but sad that Inosuke also wasn't in it because Inosuke he's Inosuke. You can't help but love him. But yeah, moving on from those two, even though I do think there were some mixed feelings I kind of had on their departure, overall, it didn't bother me that much. I'd like to say that it bothered me, but it didn't. I got used to just being with Tanjiro and Nezuko really quickly, and it was actually pretty cool. Speaking of Nezuko, I'd like to bring this up before I forget about it. The big climactic moment where Nezuko manages to survive the sun when all demons burn up inside of it. And that moment, honestly, was really good to me. I kind of knew it was coming because, of course, there are spoilers on the internet, so by the time I finally got to watching it, I already knew about it. But seeing it was still such a nice moment, especially with the fact that she was able to kind of talk, which is really nice. And overall, that moment just really hit me, man. It was so good. And it's crazy how this entire season doesn't really interest me that much. And I just don't care. But then you get to the final episode or two, and I'm just heavily invested. I want to see how this concludes. And it's just weird how Demon Slayer does that for me, where I just don't think about most of it, but then when we get to near the end, it's where things kick up. And I think that's just because of the fact that when it comes to this season and just Demon Slayer seasons in general, they try to extend their fights as long as they can. Like this fight between them and another upper ranked demon, like how they faced another one, or not another one, but the first one the last season. With this season, they fought another upper ranked demon, and that fight lasted for what was it, 9 or so episodes? I don't know, that's one of the big flaws I think Demon Slayer has, is the fights are too drawn out. I feel like the fights could be cut down a lot more, but they're always trying to make them as long as possible, and I think the reason behind that is because of the fact that they don't really have much to show in terms of the world. Because as cool as the village with all the smiths sounds, seeing all of the weaponsmiths and people building these blades would have been a cool place to explore and learn about. They can't really bother with that. They need to find other ways to fill the time. They need to find other ways to just get things done. And that's why they're just slice, 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 sword goes swing, swing, swing. Because they realize that in order to pan out the runtime, they gotta make these action scenes as long and intense as possible. And that just kind of doesn't really interest me that much. I've said it before and I say it again many, many times more. I'll probably say it. I'm not as much of an action scene person. I like story over action. If there's a good story, the action does not need to be there. Though I do appreciate a good action scene here and there, but I do prefer story over everything else. And when it came to this season, it was just more of Demon Slayer's normal, big budget animation. And it's fine for people who like it. It's fine for people who enjoy it. But for me personally, it doesn't sit with me. It just doesn't sit with me. But moving past that for now, there are 2 characters in this season I actually really like. And the first one has to be the Mist Hashira who appears, known as Muchiro, or I don't know if I said that right, but basically, he has a really nice amount of development in this season. It turns out he has a memory loss situation. He doesn't remember who he is, but then he goes through this whole thing where Tanjiro helps him kind of remind himself of who he is. and then he goes up against another upper rank demon himself and manages to win, which was a bit hard to watch at times since while the CGI on the pot wasn't bad, the CGI of the fish are terrible, but again, we'll talk about that later, as I said before. But basically, I really liked how he developed. I liked how he was going through things, and it was always really interesting to see what was happening with his story. And I was really glad to kind of see his backstory, since him and one other character, who I'll talk about in a second, have some really interesting backstories to their characters, and I kind of just wanted to follow them more than anyone else because I just enjoyed them. So, moving on to the other character I wanted to talk about, another character that I'm surprised I actually was really interested in is the guy known as Genya. Genya was a character I honestly kind of just ignored. Like, after his first appearance in the first season, completely blocked him out of my mind, completely forgot who he was. Just blanked on him completely. However, this season really drew me into his character, since it turns out that Genya actually has a brother who's a Hashira, and he wants to apologize to him, and he's trying to show that he's not weak. And it's this really interesting thing, since it seems like kind of like Genya has this demon side to him, kind of, that he uses. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it kind of gives the vibe off of a demon. And it's super interesting to see him and his whole backstory. It was probably my favorite backstory in this season, as it's kind of dark, as most Demon Slayer things are. And just overall, I really liked going into his backstory. It was really interesting, and I really liked it. Which, speaking about one more backstory, I don't really think I need to talk about the other Hashira who shows up, Mitsuri. Her backstory isn't super interesting. It's just, she's actually always been strong from a young age, and she wants to be accepted for who she is, and that's cool. I think it's a neat little backstory. But what I want to talk about that I wasn't expecting a backstory on was actually the main villain himself, Muzan, who after, I'm not sure if it was after or before, he ends up decapitating some people for interrupting his happy moment. He ends up talking about how he became a demon in the first place, and it was actually really interesting to kind of get a backstory on that, and it was super cool and just really interesting. But going back to some more negatives for a bit, since I'm done talking about the major things I want to talk about in terms of positives, is once again the CGI. The fish are like the big demon monsters in this season, where there's these two upper ranked demons, and one of them is able to like send these fish things at people, and I just didn't really like the way they looked. The CGI on them really didn't sit well with me. They looked weird, and while it wasn't hard to ignore them the first time, when they just kept flying in, more and more of them just kept appearing, the more and more hard it was to ignore, and it just looked so much worse as the story went on. I'm sure there are some people out there who could take it, but for me, it just got so hard to look at. It's just weird. It's just weird. That's the best way to put it. They were very off-putting for me, and while normally Demon Slayer is good at making things off-putting but still entertaining, these CGI fish just really should have been given a longer time to cook, I guess you could say, because they just didn't look right. I think Demon Slayer should have taken more time to work with the fish rather than stick with the CGI, because they just looked weird. But yeah, unlike a lot of people, I'm fine with waiting for Demon Slayer, but a lot of Demon Slayer fans probably don't want to wait for that. They want more seasons as soon as possible, but I don't know. Just, yeah. Overall, not a bad season, but it's just kind of more the same. There's nothing super special about this season. It's just kind of fun, I guess, but not super fun for me personally, as the story is kind of lacking. The finale is overall definitely my favorite part of this season. It's the big highlight. The beginning and the end of the season are definitely the big highlights for me, but everything else in the middle is just kind of there. So yeah, that's all I really have to say. So we're at the conclusion of this video, and one of my final thoughts, it's fine. Demon Slayer's always been fine, and this season is no different. It's more the same. It's still fine. It's okay. It's entertaining. It gets the job done. I am entertained. I am not super entertained, but I am entertained enough. And that's why I give Demon Slayer Season 3, or the Swordsmith Village arc, a 7 out of 10. It works to entertain you, and that's all it is. Nothing super special, but decent enough. So, yeah, that's all we have to say, so thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe. I always look into anime fans to the channel, and I will see you all around. Peace!